Before we start, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I know my horror-loving audience understands how much even small support means for this channel's future. Every like and comment helps this small channel survive and grow, and I truly appreciate it. All right, now let's begin. My name is Rebecca Landon, and I make documentary films about rural Appalachia. Small projects mostly, cultural preservation stuff, recording old-timers talking about traditional crafts, filming abandoned homesteads before they collapse completely, that sort of thing. It's not glamorous work, but it matters to me. My family has been in these mountains for 6 generations. The project that changed everything was supposed to be simple. My uncle owned a tobacco farm outside of Spruce Pine, North Carolina, about 200 acres of bottomland and wooded hills that had been in our family since the 1890s. He'd passed away the previous winter, and my aunt was thinking about selling the property. Before that happened, I wanted to document it. Get some footage of the old barn, the original farmhouse, the spring house down by the creek. A visual record of family history. I drove up from Charlotte on a Thursday in late September. The leaves were just starting to turn, and the light that time of year is perfect for filming. Golden and soft, makes everything look like a memory. I had my camera gear, a thermos of coffee, and a plan to spend the afternoon getting exterior shots before the sun dropped behind the ridgeline. The farm felt different than I remembered from childhood visits. Emptier somehow. My uncle had lived alone for the last 5 years after my aunt moved to a care facility, and you could tell. The grass around the house had grown wild. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. Everything had that abandoned quality, like the place was already halfway to being a ghost. I started filming around 3 in the afternoon, got some beautiful shots of the barn with the mountains rising behind it. The old tobacco hanging racks were still inside, rusty and covered in bird droppings, but they had a kind of industrial beauty to them. I was in the zone, thinking about narrative structure and B-roll, completely focused on the work. Around 5:30, the temperature dropped. Not gradually, the way it normally does when the sun starts setting. It just plummeted all at once, like someone had opened a freezer door. I was wearing a light jacket, and suddenly it wasn't nearly enough. I could see my breath. That's when I got the feeling I was being watched. I've spent enough time alone in the woods to know the difference between paranoia and genuine threat. This was the latter. That animal sense that raises the hair on your neck and makes your peripheral vision sharpen. Something was paying attention to me. I turned slowly, scanning the tree line that bordered the north side of the property. Nothing moved. No deer, no birds, nothing. The woods were completely still. I decided to pack it in for the day. The light was fading anyway, and I could come back in the morning to get more footage. I started walking back toward my car, which I'd parked near the old farmhouse. That's when I heard the whistle. 3 notes descending in pitch, clear and sharp, cutting through the silence. It came from somewhere in the woods, maybe 50 yards away. I stopped walking. My grandfather used to whistle exactly like that when he was calling the dogs in from the fields. 3 descending notes, a family signature that my uncle had used too. But my uncle was dead, and there was nobody else on this property who would know that whistle. I stood there for a moment, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a bird. Maybe it was wind moving through the barn in some weird way. Maybe I was just tired and hearing things that weren't there. The whistle came again, same 3 notes, closer this time, maybe 30 yards away, still in the woods. My hands were shaking as I reached for my camera. This is what I do when I'm scared. I document. I film. It's a reflex, a way to put distance between myself and whatever is happening. If I'm behind the camera, I'm an observer, not a participant. I turned on the camera's light and pointed it toward the tree line. The LED was bright and harsh, turning the autumn colors into washed-out whites and deep blacks. I scanned slowly across the woods, looking for movement. That's when I saw the eye shine. 2 points of light reflecting back at me from about 6 feet off the ground. Bright green, perfectly round, and absolutely motionless. Not bobbing the way a deer's eyes would, not blinking. Just staring directly at me with an intensity that made my stomach clench. I've seen plenty of eyeshine from animals at night. Deer, raccoons, possums, coyotes. They all reflect light differently, and they all move. Animals don't stay perfectly still when you shine a light at them. They either run or turn their head or shift their weight. They react. This didn't move at all. I stood there for what felt like forever. My camera light trained on those two green points in the darkness. My brain was trying to make sense of what I was seeing, running through every possible explanation. Maybe it was a tree with some reflective fungus. Maybe it was moisture on leaves catching the light in a weird way. Maybe it was anything except what it looked like. Then it whistled again, the same 3 descending notes, and I realized the sound was coming from exactly where those eyes were shining. I turned off the camera light and started walking backward toward my car, keeping my eyes on the woods. I didn't run. Some deep instinct told me that running would be the worst possible thing I could do. The eye shine disappeared the moment I turned off the light, but I could still feel it watching me, following my movement with an attention that felt almost clinical, like I was being studied. I made it to my car and got inside, locking the doors immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. When the engine started, I turned on the headlights and looked back at the tree line. Nothing, just trees and shadows and the first stars coming out above the mountains. I drove away from that farm, going way too fast for the dirt road, my tires kicking up rocks and dust. I didn't stop until I was back on the highway, surrounded by other cars and streetlights and the comfortable normalcy of civilization. I told myself I'd overreacted, seen a deer or an owl and let my imagination run wild. I was embarrassed, actually. Here I was, a grown woman who'd spent her whole life in these mountains, running away from some eye shine and a whistle that probably had a perfectly logical explanation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I'd seen in those woods knew me. Not just saw me, but knew me, recognized me, had maybe been waiting for me specifically. I did some research that night in my hotel room, looked up the history of my uncle's farm, old county records, that sort of thing. Turns out that particular piece of land had a reputation going back over 100 years. People reported hearing whistles in the woods at dusk, seeing lights that didn't move like any animal, feeling watched when they were alone in the fields. My great-great-grandmother had written about it in a diary I found scanned into a genealogy website. She called it the Watcher in the North Woods and said it had been there since before the family bought the land. Said it mostly kept to itself, but sometimes it would call out using sounds it had learned from the people who lived there, imitating voices and whistles and even laughter, trying to get people to come into the woods after dark. She wrote that her husband had heard it whistle using his father's exact pattern 2 years after his father died. He'd almost walked into the woods to investigate before she stopped him. The last thing she wrote about it gave me chills. She said it was patient. It would wait years, sometimes decades, for the right moment, for someone to be alone at the right time in the right place. And when that moment came, it would use whatever sound it thought would work, whatever would make you curious enough to step off the path. I never went back to that farm. I told my aunt I'd gotten some footage, but the light hadn't been good, and I'd have to come back another time. She sold the property 6 months later to a developer who wanted to build vacation cabins. I wonder sometimes if the new owners hear the whistle, if they see the eye shine in the North Woods when they're alone at dusk. I wonder if it's learned their patterns yet, their sounds, their voices. Because here's what I understand now. That thing in the woods has been there longer than my family, longer than anyone's family. It's watched generations of people live and die on that land, and it's learned from all of them, collected their sounds like specimens, filing them away for later use. And it knows my name now. I heard it call out to me as I was driving away, even though that's impossible given how far I was from the woods. I heard my grandfather's voice, the way he used to call me for dinner when I was a kid. "Rebecca Ann, time to come inside." I haven't made a documentary since then. Haven't picked up my camera for anything more serious than birthday parties and family gatherings. People ask me why I stopped, and I tell them I got busy with other things. That's easier than explaining the truth. The truth is that I can't go back to those isolated places anymore. Can't spend hours alone in abandoned buildings or empty fields or quiet woods, because I know now that these mountains have memories. They collect the sounds of everyone who's ever lived here, and they hold on to them. And somewhere in the North Woods of my uncle's old farm, something is still waiting, still watching, Still learning. It knows my name and it has all the time in the world to call it again. If the first story stayed with you, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let me know how it made you feel. And if there's anything you think could be improved, your suggestions are always welcome. And don't go anywhere because the next stories are even more disturbing. My name is Jennifer Moss, and what happened at my house outside of Burnsville, North Carolina still keeps me up at night. I'm writing this down because I need people to understand that some things don't care about locks or security systems or whether you believe in them or not. We moved into the house when my daughter Emma was 3 months old. It was a rental, an old farmhouse that sat on about 5 acres of wooded property at the end of a gravel road. The landlord had renovated it recently, new appliances and fresh paint, but you could tell the bones of the place were old, the kind of old that settles and creaks at night, where the floors aren't quite level and some of the doors don't hang straight. My husband David travels for work, gone 3 or 4 nights a week. I knew I'd be alone with the baby a lot, so I insisted we install a security system before we moved in. Nothing fancy, just some motion sensor cameras covering the front door, back door, and the driveway. The footage saved to an app on my phone. It made me feel safer. The first month was normal. Emma was a good baby, only waking up once or twice a night to feed. I'd gotten into a routine. Bath at 7, bottle at 8, down for the night by 9. I'd use the quiet evening hours to clean up, maybe watch something on my laptop, then go to bed myself around 11. The motion alerts from the cameras were usually nothing. A deer walking through the yard, leaves blowing across the porch. Once a black bear that scared me half to death until I realized it was just passing through on its way to somewhere else. Then one night in early November, things changed. David was in Raleigh for a conference. Emma had been fussy all evening, fighting sleep in a way that wasn't like her. I'd finally gotten her down around 10 o'clock and was sitting in the living room with a cup of tea, just enjoying the silence. My phone buzzed with a motion alert from the back porch camera. I almost ignored it, figured it was just another deer, but something made me open the app and check. The camera showed the back porch clearly, illuminated by the motion sensor light that had kicked on. There was nothing there, no deer, no leaves, nothing moving. But the light was on, which meant something had triggered the sensor. I watched for a minute, then 2. Nothing happened. I was about to close the app when I heard Emma start crying upstairs. Not her normal cry, but this high-pitched wail that sounded almost scared. I ran upstairs to her room. She was standing in her crib, which she'd just learned to do, gripping the rails and crying with real tears running down her face. I picked her up and she clung to me, her little hands fisting in my shirt. It took me 20 minutes to calm her down. I rocked her, sang to her, checked her diaper, offered a bottle. She finally settled against my chest, hiccuping those post-cry breaths that babies do. I stood there by her window, swaying gently, waiting for her to fall back asleep. That's when I saw the figure in the yard. It was standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 40 feet from the house. Too dark to make out details, just a tall shape that was darker than the surrounding darkness. It was completely still, and it seemed to be facing the house, facing Emma's window. I froze. My first thought was that someone had broken down on the road and was walking to the house for help. But there was something wrong about the way it stood. Too straight, too motionless, like a person-shaped thing that didn't quite understand how people move. I backed away from the window slowly, holding Emma tight against me. She'd fallen asleep, her breathing soft and even against my neck. I carried her to my bedroom instead of putting her back in the crib, laid her in the middle of my bed and surrounded her with pillows so she couldn't roll off. Then I grabbed my phone and checked the camera app. The back porch camera had a motion alert from 2 minutes ago. I pulled up the footage and watched. The recording showed the porch, empty and still. Then, from the right side of the frame, something moved into view. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and it moved wrong. The way it walked was too smooth, no natural bob or sway to its gait. It crossed the porch in 3 steps and stopped directly in front of the back door. The camera angle was high enough that I couldn't see its face, just the top of its head and shoulders. It stood there for 10 seconds, perfectly motionless. Then it raised one hand and placed it flat against the door. The video quality wasn't great, but I could see that the hand was wrong, too long. The fingers extended too far, like they had extra joints. Then my phone buzzed again. A new motion alert, this time from Emma's window camera that I'd set up inside her room to monitor her while she slept. I switched to that feed and my blood went cold. The window was on the second floor. There was no ledge, no trellis, no way for anyone to stand outside it without a ladder. But something was there. The camera was positioned to show Emma's crib, and in the top corner of the frame, I could see the window. There was a shape pressed against the glass from outside, dark and indistinct, but definitely there, and it was too high to be someone standing on the ground. I ran to Emma's room, my heart hammering. When I got there, the window was empty. Nothing outside but darkness and the distant tree line. But the glass was cold when I touched it. Not regular cold, ice cold. Cold enough that condensation had formed in a perfect handprint on the outside of the pane. I grabbed Emma from my bed, wrapped her in a blanket, and we spent the rest of the night in my car in the driveway with the doors locked and the engine running. I called David, but he was 3 hours away and there wasn't much he could do. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? That something tall had stood outside my door and somehow reached my second-story window. When the sun came up, I went back inside. Everything looked normal. The doors were still locked. The windows were secure. The only evidence that anything had happened was that handprint on Emma's window, and it had melted away in the morning warmth. David came home that afternoon and I told him everything. He believed me, which I was grateful for, but he also didn't know what to do about it. We couldn't afford to break the lease and move. We couldn't afford a hotel long-term. So we installed more cameras, changed all the locks, and kept Emma's room door locked from the inside at night. 3 nights later, it came back. This time I was ready. Emma was sleeping in a pack-and-play in my room, and I was watching the camera feeds on my laptop. Around 2 in the morning, the back porch camera picked up movement. The figure walked onto the porch the same way it had before. Smooth, too smooth, crossing to the back door in those long, gliding steps. It stopped in front of the door and placed its hand against the wood. Then it spoke. I couldn't hear it through the door, but I watched its head tilt slightly, and I saw its mouth move. Or what I thought was its mouth. The camera angle still wasn't good enough to see its face clearly. My phone was sitting next to the laptop, and suddenly it rang. Unknown number. I stared at it for 3 rings before I answered. There was silence on the other end. Just breathing. Soft and steady, like whoever was calling was waiting for me to speak first. Then I heard it. A whisper, so quiet I almost couldn't make it out. Let me in. The voice was wrong. Not male or female, not old or young. Just wrong, like someone who'd learned to speak by listening to recordings and didn't quite understand the mechanics of it. I hung up immediately and checked the camera feed. The figure was still at the back door, but now its head was raised slightly, like it was looking at the second floor, looking at my bedroom window. Let me in. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't from my phone. It was coming from outside my window. A whisper that somehow carried through the glass in the walls, directly into my room. Emma woke up crying. Not her normal cry. This was pure terror, the kind of scream that told me she could sense what I was sensing, that something was very, very wrong. I grabbed her and ran downstairs, not even thinking about where I was going. I just needed to move, to get away from that window and that whisper. I made it to the kitchen and stopped. The back door was right there, and I could hear it now without the phone. The whisper coming through the wood, patient and persistent. Let me in, let me in, let me in. I backed away from the door, holding Emma so tight she squirmed in my arms. I moved to the living room and pulled out my phone to call David, but before I could dial, every camera alert went off at once. Front door, back door, driveway, Emma's window. It was everywhere. I pulled up the feeds, switching between them frantically. The figure was at the back door in one feed, at the front door in another, standing in the driveway in a third, all at the same time. Multiple cameras showing the same impossible figure in different locations. Then, just as suddenly as they'd started, the alerts stopped. Every feed showed empty space, nothing moving, nothing there. I checked the perimeter cameras, the ones that covered the wider yard. Nothing. It was like the figure had simply vanished. But when I checked the saved footage later, going through frame by frame, I found something that made me pack our bags that same morning. None of the perimeter cameras had caught the figure leaving. It appeared at the doors and windows, stayed for those few minutes, and then disappeared without crossing any of the camera views that covered the yard. It didn't walk away. It simply ceased to be there. We broke the lease and moved in with David's parents in Asheville, took the financial hit and didn't look back. The landlord kept our security deposit, said we'd violated the terms of the contract. I didn't argue. I didn't tell him why we were leaving. I heard later that the house stayed empty for 8 months before someone else rented it. A young couple without kids. They lasted 3 weeks. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know why it focused on Emma, or how it could be in multiple places at once, or how it reached a second-story window with no ladder. All I know is that it wanted inside. It wanted my baby, and the only thing that stopped it was that I never opened the door. Emma is 2 years old now. She doesn't remember any of it, which I'm grateful for. But sometimes when we're out in public and she's playing, she'll suddenly stop and stare at something I can't see. Her face will go pale and she'll run back to me, crying that high-pitched, terrified cry I remember from that house. I don't know if it's still looking for her. I don't know if moving away was enough or if distance even matters to something like that. But I do know this. I will never live in an isolated place again. I will never be more than shouting distance from another human being. And I will never, ever open a door at night without knowing exactly who is on the other side. Because some things are patient. Some things will whisper and wait and come back night after night, year after year if they have to. And some things don't need doors to get what they want. They just need you to let them in. I used to run an urban exploration channel on YouTube. Abandoned buildings, forgotten towns, places that time left behind. I was good at it too. Had about 40,000 subscribers, decent ad revenue, the whole thing. I loved finding locations that nobody else knew about and documenting them before they disappeared completely. The back road outside of Marshall, North Carolina was supposed to be an easy video. I'd heard about it from a guy in a Facebook group for Appalachian explorers. He said there was an old homestead about 15 miles down this unnamed Forest Service road, completely abandoned with some interesting outbuildings still standing. Perfect content. I drove out there on a Saturday in mid-October. The leaves were at peak color, and I was planning to get some drone footage of the property with the mountains in the background. I had my camera gear, my drone, water, and snacks. I told my girlfriend Alicia where I was going and when I'd be back. I was prepared. The Forest Service road was rough but passable. Gravel and dirt, winding through dense woods with steep drops on one side. I'd driven about 12 miles when I saw the first shoe. It was hanging from a tree branch about 10 feet off the ground. A woman's high heel, black patent leather, suspended by what looked like fishing line. It was spinning slowly in the breeze, catching the afternoon light. I slowed down and stared at it. It seemed like such a random thing to see in the middle of nowhere. My first thought was that maybe someone had a weird sense of humor, like hanging boots from power lines in the city, some kind of local tradition I didn't understand. I kept driving, but now I was looking at the trees more carefully. About 100 yards up the road, I saw another one, a red stiletto also hanging from a branch, also suspended by fishing line. Then another, a silver heel with rhinestones. Then a blue one. Then a white one. I stopped the car and got out, leaving the engine running. The road was completely silent except for the wind moving through the trees. I counted the shoes I could see from where I was standing. 12 of them, all different styles and colors, all women's heels, all hanging at roughly the same height in the trees on both sides of the road. I pulled out my camera and started filming. This was weird, sure, but it was also exactly the kind of content my viewers loved. Creepy, unexplained, visually interesting. I walked slowly up the road, narrating as I went. "Look at this," I said to the camera. "Someone has hung dozens of women's shoes in these trees. I have no idea why. Maybe it's some kind of art installation. Maybe it's a memorial for something, I don't know. But this is definitely the strangest thing I've found on a back road." I kept walking and the shoes kept appearing. 20, 30, 50, all heels, all different. Some looked new, some looked old and weathered like they'd been hanging there for years. The fishing line glinted in the sunlight. almost invisible against the tree bark. When I reached about 70 shoes, I started feeling uneasy. This wasn't quirky anymore. This was obsessive. Someone had collected dozens of women's shoes and driven out to this remote location to hang them in the trees. Someone had spent hours, maybe days, doing this. I stopped walking and did a slow 360 with the camera. Shoes in every direction, hanging like strange fruit. The wind made them sway and spin, and the sound of them creaking on the fishing line was the only noise besides my breathing. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The shoes were arranged in a line, not randomly distributed through the forest, but deliberately placed to mark a path. They led deeper into the woods, away from the road, up a steep incline toward the ridgeline. I should have gotten back in my car right then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave. But I'd built my whole channel on going into places that felt wrong, and I'd never backed down before. Plus, I was thinking about the video. This could be my best content yet. I followed the trail of shoes into the woods. The trees were thick here, old-growth forest that blocked out most of the sunlight. The temperature dropped as I moved away from the road. I kept the camera rolling, kept narrating, trying to sound calm and professional even though my heart was pounding. The shoes led me about 200 yards into the forest before they stopped. The last one, a pink heel with a broken strap, hung from a low branch next to a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a structure, not a house or a barn, but something I couldn't quite categorize. It looked like someone had built a shrine out of found materials. Pieces of rusted metal, old wood, bits of broken glass arranged in a circular pattern around a central post. The post was maybe 8 feet tall, and it had things attached to it. More shoes, but also photographs. Dozens of photographs, weathered and faded, attached with tacks and staples. I moved closer, zooming in with the camera. The photographs were all of women. Different ages, different appearances, but all women. Some of the photos looked like they'd been cut from magazines. Others looked personal, like someone had taken them without the subject knowing. Candid shots of women walking, sitting, working. Under each photograph was a date written in marker. I scanned through them. 1997, 2003, 2008, 2012, 2015, 2019. The most recent one I could see was from 2023. I stopped filming. My hands were shaking too badly to keep the camera steady. This wasn't an art installation. This was something else. Something that made me think of true crime podcasts and missing person cases and things I did not want to be involved with. I backed away from the shrine, and that's when I felt it. That overwhelming sense that I was being watched. Not the vague paranoia you get when you're alone in the woods. The absolute certainty that someone was nearby, observing me, waiting to see what I would do. I turned and looked back toward the road. The path of shoes led back the way I'd come, but now they seemed less like decoration and more like markers. Like warnings, or maybe like bait. I ran, didn't think about getting better footage, didn't think about my viewers, didn't think about anything except getting back to my car. I crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping across my face and arms, my camera equipment banging against my chest. I made it back to the road and sprinted to my car, threw myself into the driver's seat and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled away, driving too fast for the rough road, I looked in my rearview mirror. For just a second, I thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the trees where the trail of shoes began. A tall figure, completely motionless, watching me leave. I didn't stop driving until I was back on the highway, surrounded by other cars and civilization. When I finally felt safe enough to pull over, I checked my camera to review the footage. It was all there. The shoes, the shrine, the photographs. Proof that what I'd seen was real. I sat in that gas station parking lot for 20 minutes trying to decide what to do. I should have gone to the police. That's what a responsible person would have done. Reported the location, showed them the footage, let them investigate. But I kept thinking about those photographs, those dates, the careful arrangement of it all. This was someone's hunting ground, someone's collection, and I just documented myself being there. I uploaded the video that night with the location information removed. Just said it was somewhere in western North Carolina. The video went viral, got 500,000 views in 3 days. Comments were going crazy, people trying to figure out where it was, true crime communities analyzing the photographs I'd captured. Then on day 4, my channel was deleted. Not suspended, deleted. YouTube said I'd violated community guidelines, but they wouldn't specify which ones. I tried to appeal, but I got nowhere. It was like someone had reported the video and gotten it pulled, and taken my entire channel with it. I tried to re-upload the footage to other platforms. Vimeo, TikTok, even Twitter. Every time, within hours, the account would be suspended or deleted. Someone was watching. Someone was making sure that footage didn't stay public. I still have the original files on a hard drive in my closet. Sometimes I think about trying again, finding a way to get the information to the right people. But then I remember that figure at the edge of the trees. The feeling of being watched. The systematic removal of every trace of that video from the internet. Whoever put those shoes there is still out there. And they know I found their shrine. They know I filmed it. They know what I look like because I was in front of the camera when I was narrating. I don't do urban exploration anymore. I work in IT now, a boring office job with predictable hours and no adventure. Alicia asks me sometimes why I gave it up when I was doing so well. I tell her I got tired of the grind, wanted something more stable. I don't tell her that sometimes I get messages from burner accounts. No text, just a photograph. Always the same image. My car, parked outside our apartment. A recent photo, maybe taken that same day. Someone is reminding me that they know where I am, that they're watching, that the trail of heels might have started in those woods, but it doesn't end there. And I don't know if the shoes are trophies from something that already happened or markers for something that's still going on. All I know is that I found something I wasn't supposed to find, and now I can't unfind it. The knowledge follows me everywhere. Every woman I see wearing heels, I wonder if her picture might end up on that shrine someday. Every date I pass on a calendar, I think about that sequence. 1997, 2003, 2008, 2012, 2015, 2019, 2023. It's 2026 now. I wonder if there's a new photograph on that post, a new date written in marker, a new pair of shoes hanging in the trees. And I wonder if whoever put them there is still walking those woods, waiting for the next person to follow the trail.